I remember that day very clearly, a day that seemed ordinary but changed my life forever. It was 1981, and I was only 14 years old. My mother took me to the dentist's office for a routine checkup. I had no idea that it would be the day I stepped into eternity, even if only for a short time. When I arrived at the clinic, the dentist discovered a cavity and decided to fill it. To ease my discomfort, they gave me nitrous oxide, what we called sweet gas back then. At first I felt slightly dizzy, but was still aware of everything happening around me. However, when the dentist signaled the assistant to increase the dosage, everything changed. About 30 seconds later, I felt an unusual energy surrounding me. Suddenly, I felt myself floating upwards, as light as air. I turned back to look down, and my heart nearly stopped. I could still see my body lying on the chair, my mother sitting nearby with a worried expression, the dentist and assistant continuing their work. I shouted, "I'm here! Mom, can you hear me?" But no one reacted. I felt myself drifting further and further from my body, and suddenly a powerful force pulled me through the ceiling. I soared into the sky at an unimaginable speed. A massive portal of light appeared before me, a vast gateway leading into a dark tunnel. I had no choice but to be drawn into it. The tunnel was immense and dark, but I was not alone. I could sense the presence of other souls, beings I could not see, yet I felt them clearly. I was being pulled through at an astonishing speed, gliding past twists and turns as if caught in an unstoppable cosmic current. At times I felt fear, but a part of me knew I was not in danger. After a while I began to hear music. It was not earthly music, but soothing, pure melodies, as if created from the very essence of light. The music did not just resonate in my ears, it vibrated within my soul, as though I was part of it. Suddenly, I realized I was slowing down. A brilliant light appeared at the end of the tunnel, growing larger and brighter than anything I had ever seen. But this was not just any light, it was warm, filled with love and peace. I knew I had arrived at a place beyond this world. As I emerged from the tunnel, an indescribable sight lay before me, an endless expanse of crystal-clear skies with light radiating from everywhere, not from any sun. Rolling fields of vibrant flowers, lush green trees, and shimmering rivers as if woven from diamonds. There were no signs of decay or imperfection. Everything was so breathtakingly perfect that I could hardly believe my eyes. I no longer felt like a 14-year-old boy. I had no sense of bodily weight, no fear, no worries. I had become my true spiritual self, pure, unrestricted by time or space. Suddenly, a being appeared. It was an angel. She had long, golden hair, eyes as blue as the sky, but no wings. She did not need to speak. I understood her through vibrations alone. "You have returned home," she said, without moving her lips. A deep joy filled my soul, a peace I had never known before. The angel guided me through a vast garden. There were no paths, yet I instinctively knew where to go. As we approached a stone bench, I saw two elderly figures sitting there. My heart tightened as I recognized them. It was my grandparents. My grandmother had passed away earlier that year, and my grandfather had died before I was born. But here, they looked younger, radiant, and full of life. "My grandson," my grandfather said, his voice warm and familiar, even though this was the first time I had ever heard it. I ran toward them, longing to embrace them. But my grandmother did not smile. She looked at me with loving but serious eyes. Raising her hand, she pointed at me and said, "You must go back now." I was stunned. I did not want to leave this place. "But I want to stay with you," I pleaded. She shook her head. "It is not your time yet, my child. You still have a mission to complete." Before I could protest, I was suddenly pulled backward. I was dragged back into the tunnel at an incredible speed, rushing through darkness and swirling passages. The heavenly music faded, the light vanished. I felt an overwhelming fear, the fear of isolation. I was trapped between two worlds belonging to neither. Then a powerful jolt occurred. I was yanked through the ceiling, back through the sky, past unseen walls, and then my eyes flew open. I was back in my body. My breath was heavy, my heart pounded wildly, my mother was crying beside me, and the dentist looked shaken. Later, I learned that I had stopped breathing. I had been in a state of clinical death for several minutes. But to me, it felt like an eternity. From that day forward, I knew heaven was real. I knew that God existed. He was the light I had seen, the pure love that had surrounded me. I was no longer afraid of death, because I knew it was just a part of the journey. And I would spend the rest of my life telling people that we never truly cease to exist. We are simply going home. Mission after the near-death experience. After returning from that experience, I no longer felt the same. I had seen heaven. I had felt the love and peace that nothing on this earth could compare to. But when I tried to share my story, most people didn't believe me. My mother looked at me with worried eyes. "My dear, you just had a reaction to the gas. Don't think too much about it." But I knew the truth. I had been there. I had seen what lay beyond this world. At that time, there was no internet, no TV shows talking about near-death experiences like today. I felt alone, as if I was carrying a sacred secret that no one could understand. But deep inside, I knew I had a mission: to tell the world that there is life after death, that God exists, and that heaven is real. After that experience, my life was never the same. I started to notice things I had never paid attention to before. When I prayed, I felt a true connection with God, as if He was listening to me directly. I also began receiving strange signs. One day, I was sitting in my room, wondering whether I had really been to heaven or if it was just my imagination. Suddenly, a gentle breeze passed through, even though the windows were closed. I heard a voice in my mind. "You have seen what you needed to see. Now share it." I shivered. I knew it wasn't my imagination. Later, every time I read the Bible, I began to understand things that I had never understood before. The stories about heaven, about God's light, about life after death, all of them perfectly matched what I had experienced. Jesus once said, "I am the resurrection and the life. Whoever believes in me will live, even though they die." John 11:25. This verse suddenly became alive in my mind. I had died, but I was still alive. I had seen the truth of Jesus' words. Many years later, when the internet emerged, I began researching others who had experiences like mine. I was amazed to find that thousands of people around the world had told nearly identical stories about the light, the unconditional love, the heavenly music, and the departed loved ones waiting for us. One of the stories I read was about a man who had a near-death experience after a car accident. He said that when his soul left his body, he saw a golden gate, but a powerful voice stopped him. "It is not your time yet." The similarities to my story were undeniable, but what astonished me the most was that thousands of people had seen Jesus in their experiences. Some of them had been atheists, never believing in God, but when they died, He welcomed them. One woman described how, during a near-death experience on an operating table, she saw a man in a white robe radiating light. He reached out his hand and said, "I love you. Go back and tell the world that I am the way, the truth, and the life." Now, at 54 years old, I know that I am alive for a reason. I was not just a lucky 14-year-old boy who survived. I'm a messenger, a bearer of a divine message. I want people to know that God is real. He is not just an abstract idea, but the loving Creator who is always waiting for us to return home. Heaven exists, and it is more beautiful than anything we can imagine. There is no suffering, no fear, only pure love. Our loved ones are not truly gone. They are still waiting for us, and one day we will be reunited with them. Death is not the end. It is merely a doorway to an eternal world. If you are grieving for a lost loved one, if you are afraid of death, If you are unsure whether there is life after this one, believe me, heaven is real, God is real, and we are never truly separated from those we love. Open your heart, pray, seek God. He is waiting for you just as He waited for me. And when the day comes, when we step through the threshold between life and death, we will realize that we never truly died. We were simply going home. I don't expect you to believe me immediately. I only ask that you think. If I, a regular 14-year-old boy in 1981, could have this experience without any prior knowledge of it, then perhaps it wasn't just a dream. Perhaps it was real. And if heaven is real, if Jesus is real, what does that mean for you? Seek the truth. Ask God. And listen, you will find that He has always been there, just as He has always been with me.